press about something now.
Yeah, you should see a pop-up with a blue button.
Hmm. Don't see it. Don't see one.
It might be behind your Zoom window. So you might need to move your Zoom window out of the way to see the pop-up.
Okay, click OK. That one.
Yep,
No?
that's right.
Are we gone? We're on. We're on.
We're on.
Okay, so this will be the virtual book launch for Portraits from Paris. I'm Gavin Cologne-Brookes, and what I'm going to do now is wait a couple of minutes for people to join, and then I will begin. Okay. Okay, I am going to begin. So, welcome everybody. This is the uh, virtual book launch for Portraits from Paris, my fifth book with Louisiana State University Press, over 30 years. And so I would like to thank everybody I've worked with over the last 30 years and five books at LSU Press for their brilliance in putting these books together. But for this particular book, I'd like to thank James Long, the commissioning editor, and James Wilson and Sunny Rosen, who has organized this event. I know that it's Sunny's last such event. She's done several hundred over 4 years, and she now has a job at as a professor in writing at Michigan State. And so thank you, Sunny, on behalf of all the authors that you've worked for with these events over several years. And thank you for this one too. I'd also like to thank Michelle Newstrom, who designed my previous book on Bruce Springsteen, American Lonesome, and this book. All the designers have been excellent. Michelle has made use in both these books of my paintings, which feels particularly appropriate this time because it's partly a book about becoming a painter. Maybe you can't judge a book by its cover, but I think you can certainly judge a cover. And I'm thrilled with this. I think she's done an outstanding job. So thank you, Michelle, for that, both with paintings inside and outside the book. I am Gavin Cologne-Brookes. Rather than explain more about who I am, what I will do is simply read the first paragraph of the prologue of the book, because it's a memoir, and it really explains where this book came from, because it's about me in 2019. I literally began the book in 2019 with these words, living in Paris, and the start of it is called Severance. I learned this as a child: never look up to someone, never look down on them, always look at them. What I did as a child, I do all the more at present. I've taken severance and become an emeritus professor. My wife, Nikki, teaches mathematics here in Paris while I explore. A carte Louvre professionnelle provides access to the Louvre and Musée Delacroix and helps me feel I belong somewhere. A carte blanche gets me into the Musée d'Orsay and Orangerie. I wander at will through free venues like the Petit Palais and La Vie Romantique, and in time we'll visit everywhere from the Picasso to the Pompidou, the Rodin to the Cognac J. I go where my mood suits, discovering a city materializing for me like a painting. And so I wrote this memoir between 2019 and 2024 during our 5 years in Paris, and it provoked all sorts of memories about school and about painting, partly through being in a new place. These years, by chance, happened to coincide in a way that I didn't know when I began the book would happen. They coincided with several historic events: Brexit, the COVID pandemic, the Russia's renewed or expanded invasion of Ukraine, which had actually begun in 2014, the death of Queen Elizabeth II, and the book. The book ends with the Paris Olympics, very briefly, in the sense that we left the day that the Paris Olympics began. So there's a very specific time scale to those 5 years in Paris historically. What Michelle has also done is on the back, instead of an author photo, we have a portrait, a self-portrait that I did while in Paris. And this depicts the fact that I wrote this book, for the most part, sitting at a window in the Denon wing of the Louvre, surrounded by Spanish paintings, Goya's in particular, looking out at the Tuileries and back into my past. We're now back in Wiltshire, and I'm in our garden cabin. It's just gone a few minutes after 8 o'clock here, UK time, just gone 2 o'clock Louisiana time, and some of you are on different time zones again. I believe there are people looking in here from Bologna, Vancouver, South Carolina, Montreal, Milan, Paris, and perhaps other places too. If you ask a question at the Q&A in about 25 minutes time, maybe identify yourself and where you're from. That I think would be interesting. You may, anybody listening and watching may also wish to make use of LSU Press's 40% book discount offer. There is a voucher apparently by the question button or the chat button. But regardless of that, thank you very much for joining us here. Portraits from Paris, school and travel remembered from the City of Light. This is creative non-fiction. It's an imaginative reconstruction of unreliable recollections. The further back into childhood one goes, I think the more unreliable those recollections are, the more novelistic they are, and perhaps the later ones are more journalistic. But I certainly believe that a great deal of perception of all our perception is creative, and to a large extent, memory, a great amount of a memory is also an act of the imagination, and that's the way in which I've approached this book. There are three strands to the book. The first one is the boarding school experience between the ages of 8 and 17 in England between 1969 and 1978. I don't say my experience because I do my best to avoid there being too closely a personal link to myself. I call the boy, or a boy. I call the mother and father, the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, and I would want to create some kind of distance between the actual family that I grew up in and the family that is depicted in the book. This is partly because I think that what the boy experiences is something that many children in England at that time who went to boarding school would have had very similar experiences, and so there's a generic quality, I think, to that. The one place where I do refer to our actual family history is through the name Cologne, because we are, so far as my research shows, we are descended from Admiral de Coligny, the French Huguenot leader, the French Protestant leader, who was assassinated in Paris at the start of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in 1572. So the Coligny-Cologne link is the one that I do say something about. The second strand is life in Paris between 2019 and 2024, with those as a background, as a backdrop to that, those historic events that I've made reference to already. And the third strand are the episodes of restless travel that I undertook between soon after school and our arrival in Paris. So that is 1979 to 2018. Now, these three strands might seem quite disparate. And certainly when I was writing, I was thinking, how do these things all connect? But in terms of the narrative, the way the narrative is glued by a number of themes, one of which is incarceration, as in school, and escape, as in travel. But a very important one is the theme of oil painting, of my interest in oil painting and becoming an oil painter. When I was at school, imagination and then oil painting was provided escapism from that boarding school environment. In terms of travel, oil painting, my interest in oil painting enhanced the travel in terms of focus on galleries, subject matter, and my interest in and study of various different painters. And in terms of the time in Paris, it provided for me a major focus during those 5 years. Another theme that connects the different sections, and I think connects the boy and the man, is the notion of recurring dreams. When I was at boarding school, I had numerous recurring dreams, and I didn't have those through much of the rest of my life until we moved to Paris, and then I started having recurring dreams again. Maybe that was because I'd moved out of a familiar life into an unfamiliar life, which is the same thing that would have happened with boarding school. And that in some ways perhaps triggered my interest in going back over those years. So I just want to read the very end of the prologue to show how I'm trying to make that connection between the boy I'm remembering and the man that I am, or that was in 2019. This brings me to the recurring dream, and this is a dream the boy had, a drama of arrival and departure. It involves my parents and I drifting through the night on a small boat with a candle in place of a steam funnel. We bump into a sandy beach. I understand I'm to jump ashore. But when I turn round, they've stayed aboard. The boat is already drifting back into the darkness. My parents gaze from either side of the candle at their maroon sun. Soon they're so far away as to be featureless. I cup my hands. What if the candle fails? Perhaps they reply, but I hear nothing. Swallowed by the night, my parents and the candle boat recede to resemble a floating star. With nothing to look at but immensity, I close my eyes. Depending upon my mood, I open them to find myself either an adult in my current life in Paris or a child in a dormitory. So I'm conscious in writing this memoir of two voices, two mindsets. One is the adult and one is the child. The adult knows a lot about the context of his life and more historical elements and so on. The boy knows nothing except his own life, and the boy is trying to make sense of these events. Now, as I then enter the book proper, the chapter is called Departure. No child who, at the age of 8 or younger, who goes through this experience of leaving home and going somewhere else that they're not familiar with, and not really understanding why they're being sent or taken to that place, will have indelibly imprinted on their memory the moment of departure from home to the strange place. And so as I read these two passages, perhaps think about the fact that I'm moving from the man's voice, which is remembering the home that he was at, the school, the house he was in, and then gradually it shifts to entirely to the child's viewpoint, where the child has no reference beyond his own experience. One day, long ago and far away, a boy is sent to boarding school. He has no idea that he won't see home for several weeks and will never again live there permanently. Home is a house in the countryside on the border of Surrey and Sussex, opposite a green field that rises to a solitary oak on the horizon. For the next decade, the boy only spends school breaks and occasional Sundays there. For 5 years, he'll attend a, quote, preparatory school, Thornditch, on the edge of a Sussex town. For the next 4 years, he'll be at a, quote, public school, Grimpton College, on a hill dominated by a so-called chapel that's far bigger than any normal church. Each school is up a driveway that separates it from the ordinary world. Each offers a distant view of wide waters. Thornditch looks out at a reservoir sprinkled with sailboats, Grimpton at the South Downs and the sea. And so we then move to a bit where the boy and his brother, not his sister, but just his brother, and the parents are in the car, and the mother and father in the front, and the two boys in the back. And the older boy has experienced this before. The boy sits behind the father so he can see the mother's profile. The father pulls out of the driveway and speeds down country lanes towards Thornditch. Never before has the boy felt such discomfort. The jacket presses the scratchy shirt into his shoulders. The collar and tie chafe his neck. The shorts rub the top of his legs. The garters pinch his shins. The socks scratch his calves. The brand new lace-ups press the bone in line with his big toe. Mummy, he says, the uniform itches. Don't be a sissy. And it's mother and father now. You're a big boy. She takes her compact case from her handbag, clicks it open, dabs her nose with a powdery disc. She snaps it shut, puts it back in her handbag and pulls down the sunshade to look in the mirror. She backcombs her hair with a fut sound, lifting the front and combing part of it down, then opens pale lipstick and makes her mouth an O. Mummy, why are we going to school on a Sunday? Mother, you're going to board. What's board? Stay overnight. Until tomorrow. For 3 weeks. Then I come home? For an exeat, says the brother. I don't want an exeat. You will, says the brother. An exeat, the father explains, is like parole. You get out for good behavior. Then you go back, says the brother, and start all over again. The mother has finished reapplying her lipstick. She slides her lips, smiles into the mirror, and brushes the corner of her mouth with her little finger. Who will look after us? The matrons, says the father. Looking out of the car window, the boy entertains himself with a silent interview. He's a spaceman heading for the rocket at Cape Canaveral. What do you most look forward to about the launch, Commander? I most look forward to the juddering power of the engines beneath me. What do you least like about space travel, Commander? I least like the itchy spacesuit. What is the purpose of your journey, Commander? A mission to the moon to destroy matrons for the benefit of all mankind. What are matrons, Commander? Machines designed by aliens to destroy all known life in the galaxy. Why not destroy the aliens, Commander? The matrons have killed all the aliens with Exiats. So what's happening there, I suppose, is that the boy is using his imagination to protect himself against this unknown experience, and of course, in a sense, is putting himself at the center of the narrative, and in a way, putting himself in control. He is, after all, sees himself as the commander. The world that he is going to enter, that he doesn't know about at this point, is actually, in many ways, looked at now, is a pretty brutal world. And I want to give some sense of that. Early, perhaps within the first week or so of boarding school, at the age of 8, he is caught talking after 6 o'clock at night in the dormitory, and you can't do that. And an officer, this is a very military school, an officer who's a 13-year-old boy with power comes up to him, to his bed, and says, at dawn, you will be taken to the headmaster's study, and the headmaster will sort out your indiscretions. And so he finds himself at dawn outside the headmaster's study, which is a Victorian room full of, all around the sides are stuffed birds, taxidermied birds in cases. But before he goes in, he sees a portrait, and it's clearly of the headmaster's father, because he has the same veiny red nose that the headmaster has. And he goes up to the portrait, and he's fascinated by it, and he sort of touches it because he's interested in the liquidity in the eye, how realistic it is, the way the nose seems to come forward. And he presses the nose and dents the canvas. This is fairly typical of the kind of thing that the boy does that gets him into trouble. But at this point, he isn't noticed for that. He jumps down. The headmaster comes out, ushers him into the taxidermy bird-lined study, and gets out a long pale stick, switches on a lamp, places the stick on the desk, and says, "Have you anything to say?" "How old are the birds?" Glinty, his name is Glinty because he wears spectacles, peers at the birds as if he hasn't noticed them before. "Oh, I should think 100 years or more. They'd have been treated by a taxidermist and encased as if in flight or song." "What do you mean?" "Sir, what do you mean, sir?" "What do you mean, sir?" "The birds are stuffed. They look hungry. Stuffed with sawdust and wool." The boy looks again at the dusty birds. "Who killed them?" Glinty takes the folded handkerchief from his breast pocket and blows his veiny nose until it's even redder. "When I asked you if you had anything to say, I didn't intend you to embark upon a conversation about taxidermy." He folds the handkerchief and puts it back in his pocket. "Have you evidence to mitigate your misdemeanor?" "There's a painting of elephants behind you." "That's a print," says Glinty. "Those are Kenyan elephants in the Masai Mara, the Kenyan wilderness." The boy has no idea what he's talking about. "Kenya was once upon a time part of the empire. We ruled half the world." "Where's my brother?" "Brother? No doubt behaving appropriately somewhere. Is that all you have to say?" "I don't like kippers." "That's a red herring." This confuses the boy further. "You talked after lights out. I must therefore eat you." "Eat me?" "Beat. I intend to thresh you." "Has the grass in the painting been threshed, sir?" "Remove gown, drop pajamas, bend over chair." There's a chair to the left with a green cushion. The boy pulls his pajamas down and holds the chair handles. Whack. Burning, stinging. Whack. 2. The boy counts. He does this when gassed by the dentist, Mr. Dixon, who's always looking to gas you and take out your teeth. Whack. 3. Some adults like to damage you. That's why you need to be brave. You must hide within yourself. Whack. 4. The boy grips the chair. The wall is mildewed. The door is shut. "Is this what you came to the moon for, Commander?" Whack. 5. A pause. Maybe it's over. The matrons have caught him and taken him to Emperor Minos' Zed. Whack. 6. Raise pajamas, don gown, return to the dormitory. As he leaves, his bottom set to sting all morning, the boy glances up at the portrait of Glinty's father. Due to the dent at the bridge of his veiny nose, The man's expression now has the hint of a sneer. And so the first part and the second part go through with various episodic events, some of which are equally brutal in both schools, but there are also some, I think there are some funny episodes as well, and some lighter episodes. For instance, there is a Latin lesson in which the Latin master falls asleep at the start of the lesson, doesn't wake up till the bell goes at the end of it. There is a French lesson where clearly the French teacher doesn't know any French. And there is a sex education lesson when the colonel and major, this being a military school, who are neither of whom are married, have to tell the boys about sex education when they perhaps don't know anything much to tell them, and certainly don't want to be conducting this lesson. In part two, equally episodic, what is going to happen, of course, from 13 to 17 is the boy is going to have to negotiate adolescence and all the difficulties that brings at this second boarding school. But the second and third elements of the book are life in Paris and the way in which that leads into memories of travel between school and the present. So each of those Paris chapters has the title of a foreign city. So there is, for instance, there are chapters called Omaha, Vancouver, Moscow, Rome, Istanbul, Nairobi, Montevideo, San Francisco, Kolkata. And I like to think, deluded though I may be, that in a kind of Proustian way, something in Paris at the time reminds me of something that triggers a memory of a travel episode. So, for instance, the Grande Rue de Paris, the Ferris wheel in Paris, periodically appears at Christmas and summer on the Terrasse des Feuillants, on the edge of the Tuileries. And this reminds me of a Ferris wheel incident when I was 18 in Waterloo, Nebraska, at the Douglas County Fair. But the episode that I'm going to read the beginning of to you is in fact a different one, but quite a pertinent one, I think, perhaps. And that is a chapter entitled Kiev, about the capital of Ukraine. And again, you'll perhaps see the way in which it moves from thoughts in Paris to a memory of that. It's a hot September with constant blue skies. COVID is escalating again. France has yet to introduce reciprocal measures, but quarantining remains if you travel to Britain. Complicating travel to or from mainland Europe seems designed to camouflage the effects of Brexit. Yet new cases in Paris number over 4,000 a day, the highest since May. Masks are mandatory, though many wear them on their chins. Worldwide infections total over 25 million. Perhaps it's a sense of mortality that led me to imagine creeping into the catacombs through a tunnel on the abandoned railway, the Petite Ceinture, to wander the dark corridors of the dead beneath the city of light. I prefer Père Lachaise, where one has open air and a sense of personalities, not least the Comtesse de Demidov, whose posthumous offer of her personal fortune in return for spending a year in her spacious tomb seems to me to sum up what Leon Paul Farge called the bitter, faithful softness of the dead. The jumbled bones of the catacombs lack any such sense of individuality. Rabelais and Robespierre are irretrievably dispersed, while, as Graham Robb observes, the victims of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre intermingle with the Catholics who killed them. But Paris will one day be Paris again. Much depends on an idea embodied in a word. Few cities provide such a vivid image before you visit. Kiev, in contrast, was a mere name on a map, a flat, featureless city. But sometime after the Revolution of Dignity, I visited Taras Shevchenko National University and discovered the city's vibrant beauty, including its own catacombs in the caves of Lavra, and something of the traumatic history of Ukraine. Like her city and country, my guide, whom I'll call Alina Petrenka, was a mixture of optimism and pessimism. Proudly Ukrainian, but with a Russian grandfather, she was as sharp in demeanor as in her observations. Her quizzical eyebrows met as if in echo of her dual but decisive nature. She knew her city thoroughly and was as fiercely independent as her country. Her approach to English epitomized her character. For instance, she told me of her red cat. He was ginger, but she called him red because we call gingerhead people redheads. Her logic was remorseless. Unfortunately, English is not always a logical language. If a person is ginger, we say red, I explained, but if a cat is ginger, we say ginger. Ah, because cats don't care, said Alina. Not like people, or me anyway. I do care. During our revolution of dignity, I walked to the park and went on the march. You can simply say I went, and I walked is only one syllable. Said Alina, but you say markedly. Alina's son Bodan, a student pianist, joined us some of the time, stopping near the funicular to play a street piano. But mostly it was just me listening to Alina. We meandered for hours through cobbled lanes, up and down hills and steps, past business blocks and czarist palaces, round parks, along the Dnipro River, not the Russian term Dnieper, Alina instructed. All the while she explained the significance of streets and buildings. So I was very privileged to have that opportunity to explore Kyiv in a time that, you know, in 2018, I think that was, but that gives you an example of the travel element of the book. But what all holds all this together, the glue for all this, is the painting theme, and I want to end with saying something about the painting theme through the character of Tom Popjoy, because in that bit that I read at the start, I mentioned the chapel. Well, the chapel is very significant in the second half of the book, because in that chapel there is a crypt, and beneath the chapel there's a crypt, and in that crypt there was an art school, and in that art school there was an art master, and that art master was Tom Popjoy. I did a drawing of him when I was perhaps 16, and this is what Tom Popjoy looked like, and I've been fairly faithful to his features and so on in creating this figure, but I have found no reference to him whatsoever in the school archives, and it's as if he didn't exist, but he definitely did exist, because here is the drawing of him. So this is about how this is the first meeting with this Popjoy. It's early evening. The chapel is lit with gloomy sidelights. The boy crosses the paving stones diagonal to the central aisle, at the top of which is the stained glass window depicting the schools that form the Stone Brain Foundation. At the end of the corridor, he descends the winding steps and finds the door ajar. Through the gap, he glimpses a green-faced man with a shock of white hair offset by a dazzling blue suit. The man appears to be talking to a class hidden from view. Late the next afternoon, he finds the white-haired man on his own. He's wearing a lemon yellow suit with matching shirt and tie, and white shoes that echo his shock of hair. His face, which looked green yesterday, is in fact a swarthy pale olive, perhaps Hispanic, but evidently lacking in exposure to sunlight. A bone-white pipe sags from his shiny lips. Hello, the man closes one eye as the smoke rises. Have we met before? No, sir. The man's scowl darkens his face. Although his hair is white, his eyebrows are black above blue eyes. He holds out a long-fingered hand. Popjoy, he says. Tom Popjoy, art master emeritus. Ça va? How's it going? The boy shakes his hand. It's icy cold. How do you do, sir? I do rather well, but don't call me sir. Hadn't you better tell me who you are? And so this Popjoy is anti-hierarchical. He is a Francophile, and he introduces the boy. He gives the boy he lived in France. He studied in France at the École des Beaux-Arts on the left bank in Paris. He gives the boy his map of Paris from the 1950s. He gives the boy canvases, oil paints. He introduces him to art, to the world of art. He gives him Delacroix's journal to read, and generally just gives the boy all the material that he will need in order to become the painter that he will become, and to give him an actual form of escape from this boarding school environment. The book ends with an epilogue called Reunion. So we've started with Severance and we end with Reunion. And in that reunion, I go back with Nikki and with our two adult daughters to the house that the boy left in 1969 on that journey in departure. And we go from there, we travel from there to a reunion at the school that he was going to. And so I like to think that the trajectory of the book is from severance and alienation towards reconciliation, and the boy and the man, in a sense, meet up again, as it were, in that reimagining that journey. And so that's what Paris did for me. Paris brought all these thoughts back to me about Paris, about painting, and about boarding school, and the result was Portraits from Paris. And that's what I have to say about the book. And now I believe we'll have some Q&A. I'm very happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you so much. Our first question is about, you talked about the sort of unique positioning of the book as partially drawing on personal experiences, but then also partially fictionalized. Can you talk more about sort of how you stumbled on that as the best way of telling the story, and why you decided that this was the way to tell the story, and also the challenges of telling a story in that way?
I think that the American author Joyce Carol Oates said that, she said, when you look at memory and you try and visualize what you see, it kind of disperses in front of you. And I found when I was trying to write about genuine memories of childhood, that I had almost no choice but to novelize them, because you just have these incidents and you've got to try and join everything together in some way. And I think by making, and one way in which that happened was that I made him third person, and present tense, and I was trying to recall and put in the details that I remembered, but I knew I had to sort of I had to create there had to be a kind of fictional element to that. I think as one moves into the travel episodes, for instance, the Kiev one, it's more journalistic, more fact-based, because it's more recent, and because I had a context for it. But the child only has what he experiences, and the child as well, at that very time that he's experiencing it, is also kind of reimagining and having to invent things at the same time. He doesn't know anything about, the colonel or the major, except what he witnesses and then creates out of that character. So it just seemed to me, in the act of doing it, that one didn't really have a lot of choice, and that it reinforced for me that what we think of as factual memory is actually imaginative reconstruction. So I'd be very interested. I know one or two people who were at one or two of those schools, and I'd be very interested to hear whether they remember it in the way that I do, and the extent to which it has become fictionalized. I think we fictionalize things as the years pass anyway. We create narratives of our past.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, could you talk a bit more about writing about people that are inspired by real people? How do you do that? Did you worry about, somebody reading the book and saying, "Hey, this person is based on me"? And did you feel a desire to pull punches or paint people in more flattering lights? Or, how do you sort of write people that are based on people that you really knew?
Since I read the bit about Popjoy, now I think that if his real name his first name was Tom, and I think that he would be pretty flattered by the way I've described him, because he has a lot more knowledge, I think, than or he imparts a lot more knowledge than he probably actually did. He's certainly better dressed than he actually was, but I was never interested really in creating characters who weren't. I mean, obviously, some of the early ones, some of the boarding school ones, are caricatures as seen through through the child's eyes, and all children see adults as caricatures. So I was never pretending that the real person was quite like the boy imagines. Uh, in other cases, I mean, I suppose I tried to stay faithful to what people said. I changed names, and I changed personal attributes, and I changed circumstances, and yet it still seems to me to be it's creative nonfiction, because everything is based on some kind of fact. So I'm a great collector of things. So, for instance, I mentioned the episode in Omaha. Well, I have here the actual flyer uh, for the Douglas County Fair, Waterloo, Nebraska, in 1979. So if someone wanted to check facts about that, one could do so. But in terms of the characterization, I use a lot more leeway to invent characters, and I certainly don't use people's personal names unless it's somebody famous, I suppose. And there's nobody like that who's actually a character as such in the book.
Thank you. Another question that we have here is about your previous books. So this feels like a bit of a departure. It's sort of unique among the books that you've already published. Can you talk about how it sort of is related to or in conversation with, or sort of what's the lineage of these books and the ways that they're related or not related to one another?
The connection in some ways is painting. So I wrote a book on William Styron, and this began, and this was partly based on a kind of on a friendship, and it's a kind of a critical memoir. So I'm talking about his books, but I'm also talking about meeting him and so on and so forth. So there was always from that point onwards, from 2014, there was always an element of dramatizing actual encounters with people, in this case with Stein. But this began because I knew he was unwell and I'd never meet him again, never see him again. So I did a painting of him from when I first met him. And that out of that, then I thought, well, I can actually write a book about this. So this began with a painting. This one was Bruce Springsteen was hugely influential as Pop Joy, in terms of me becoming an academic, in fact, but also just having a sense of drive to become something. So, the song Badlands galvanized me enormously. But in this case, I wrote the book. So again, it's got narrative in it, and it's got memoir in it. And then towards the end of the book, I thought, oh, I need to have a painting. And so then I did the painting after that. So the painting element has been there for quite a long time. And I suppose, again, the Styron book has a bit where I go to Auschwitz and I go to Styron's settings for his books to the American South. And again, with the Springsteen book, I go to Asbury Park, and I find the different buildings that he's referring to in Born to Run. So that narrative travel element has also always been part of my other two books, and that comes out again in this one. So in that way, it's the big departure is that it isn't a book about one another author or another writer, but it is quite a lot about various different painters as well. So in that sense, yes, it is a departure, and it's more of a creative book, but I was sort of heading that way, I think, anyway.
Thank you. Another question we have here is that many authors discuss the difficulty of writing about other types of art. So writing about visual art, writing about music, and it's something that folks run up to again and again. Can you talk about how you tackle that and the difference maybe between writing about painting and writing about music, or how to sort of translate art into from other mediums into written art?
I was careful with the Springsteen book. I mean, I have some guitars and there's a piano in this room, but I'm not a musician at all. I mean, even the cat would leave if I started playing anything. So I was very careful with that book, never to claim that I knew anything other than, I mean, I really focused on the lyrics, and I treated Springsteen as a writer. I do have a chapter on performance, but I'm looking at it simply from the perspective of what I know about, and I know about books, literature, something of America, and travel, and so on. With this, I was quite comfortable writing um, about painting, because I was writing with when I look at paintings, two things are happening. I'm studying how Rembrandt or Vermeer or whoever, what kind of technique they're using, and then I'm trying to learn something from that. But I'm also interested in the personalities who are creating and who are created. So I spent quite a long time sort of reading and thinking about Van Gogh through his letters, and bringing some of that in. And also there's the kind of personal relationship that I personally feel like one can have with a portrait. Now, this is Madame de Luynes, who features in the by Maury Duval. It's a painting, a mesmerizing painting in the Musée d'Orsay. And I got very interested in who she was. She was a courtesan of the demi-monde, the Parisian demi-monde of the 19th century. And I started exploring her biography and found that she was buried in Montmartre Cemetery. And I went looking for the tomb and so on. So I'm interested in the personalities of the painters, the personalities that they paint in portraits, and I'm interested in the artistic technique. And I don't try and claim to be a professional critic of painting or of music, but I am simply somebody who is very interested in those mediums. And I try and, since my medium is either painting or writing, I try and write about them as well as learn from them as a painter, and then express those views for other people.
Thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit about what you're working on next? Is it similar, different from this project? Can you tell us about that?
I have a title which, in my head, is so good that I can't tell anybody. I have an area of my life that I've never written about, that I would be interested in writing about. Well, Balzac says that not enough attention has been paid to what it is, what the social pressures are that lead people into the kinds of working lives that they have, and that's a kind of starting point in a way. And I have a musical genre that interests me, which is jazz, that kind of might come into it in some way. But all I have, I mean, I didn't realize really that I was writing this book until it was nearly written. And so I simply collect material, and I sort of mess around and see what happens. And I do often have a title that's like the magnet that draws things together, but I just wait for it to materialize. Again, an author said, I think again it was Joyce Carol Oates, said, the trick is not to think you're sitting down to write the book, and then it can materialize. And I've always thought about the sculptures of Michelangelo. There are two in the if you see the statue of David in Italy, in Florence, as you lead up to it, there are various incomplete statues that he didn't finish. And what interests me about those, and also perhaps the two that are in the Louvre, is that he is finding the shape in the stone. And I think that one has all that material, and it's a question of just finding a shape that comes out of the things that interest you. So I'm at that stage at the moment of not having everything thoroughly in focus, but whatever it will be, I think it'll be quite different to anything I've written before.
Thank you. The next question we have here is from, well, you might know this person. This is from Z Natasha. Question says, there's a lot of humor in the boarding school chapters. Was there any episode you particularly enjoyed writing?
Oh yes, yes, there was. Hello, Natasha. Yes, I think I know who you might be. Yes, I loved writing. There's two the two that I referred to, the Latin lesson and the French lesson. Now, the French lesson is run by someone called Madame Buffont, and Madame Buffon is really it's a letter writing lesson, and in which she tells the boys exactly what they're supposed to say to their parents. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed this, etc. But she insists on turning it into a French lesson, mainly because there seems to be no logic as to why she would be turning it into a French lesson, except that the boys are vaguely aware that her husband was her dead husband was French, and they also kind of think that he fell off a bridge on purpose, and they're trying to work out why exactly that might be. But if you do actually meet Madame Buffon, you might sort of work out about why he fell off a bridge on purpose. But she doesn't know much about French, but she does insist on trying to speak French to them. So I really enjoyed working on that and having the boys interact with that. And the Latin lesson where the master falls asleep fairly soon, but the boys are not quite sure whether he's asleep or not as they continue to read all this Latin. And then well, I had great fun writing that. And I suppose I yes, that's probably those are probably two of them. No, also in the second half, the boy is he's made to join the Navy on a Wednesday afternoon. The Navy doesn't have a boat. All they have is a uniform, and they have to go marching up and down the driveway. And there are a couple of boys who think they're very important members of the Navy. So I really enjoyed writing that. And another one where the boy jumps ship from the Navy and does community service with another little boy, and they encounter a World War One veteran. They go and mow his lawn for him, and the veteran tells them, you know, sort of they learn something, and I find that funny to read. But again, all these things are based on fact. You know, I was press ganged into a navy that didn't have a boat. I did jump ship and do community service, and I did mow the lawn of a man whose hand was split in two in the First World War, and was a World War II veteran, and gave us a silver threepence each. So everything's based on fact, and then of course I build. You know, narrative takes over to some extent, but all these events are from some kind of memory.
Thank you so much. Well, we have a lot of comments here, which we'll be able to share with you afterwards, but that is our last question. So we can go ahead and say thank you and goodbye to the audience.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody who has been listening in my to me talking in my cabin here. Reminder: LSU Press have a 40% book discount offer. You can see the voucher. The other thing I would say is that if you happen to be in the Louisiana area on the 1st of November, then I am going to be at the Louisiana Book Festival. And I'd love it if somebody came up to me and said, oh, I saw you talking there. And I don't mind if you have a book or not, but if you do, I love signing books. I always put the date and the place because all these things disappear so quickly. But that's where I'll be on the 1st of November. But thank you, everybody, and thank you, Sunny. Your duty is done. You are at the end of your last session, and have a great time as a professor at Michigan State. And thank you, James Wilson, and thank you everybody at Louisiana University State University Press for all your help in the production of this book.